Hello friends, welcome back to Reveal Truth. Today we have part 2 of our previous story. I won't keep you longer than necessary, so let's begin. I slumped against the door, feeling even more exhausted. Cheryl looked over at me and asked a question that I couldn't yet answer. What about Doug? My parents didn't even attempt to excuse Glenda. My father's only comment was disgusting, while my mother's remarks were twofold. But they're just boys. About Donnie and Daryl and the gardeners. That's just, well, we won't be using them anymore. But about my brother Doug, who I viewed as the worst offender. Well, Bobby, it was just one mistake. Anyone can make a mistake. He's your brother. Exactly, Dad. I'm his brother. And she's my wife. And it wasn't a mistake or an accident. His stick didn't accidentally fall into her holes. I was yelling at my parents. Honey, there's no need to be vulgar. You've got to forgive. My mother was more offended by my language, seemingly, than my brother's betrayal and my wife's infidelity. If not now, when can I be vulgar, Mother? What could be worse than your brother ducking your wife? My mother looked disgusted that I was once again being vulgar. And not just once, but regularly, like clockwork, for months. Before and after his wedding. So, there's his infidelity as well. If I shouldn't forgive my cheating wife, should Megan forgive her duck boy husband? My father had the decency to look abashed. Now, Bobby, he began again, he's your little brother. You've got to make some allowances. I didn't hear the rest. I was going out the door when I stopped, turned, and looking at my parents, said, "You're wrong. I don't have a brother. And the way things are going, I may soon not have any parents." I closed the door on their shocked faces. I had turned my phone off, and when I turned it back on to check for work messages, I saw that there were multiple messages from Glenda and one from my sister-in-law Megan. There was also one from Doug. I handled several from work, deleted all Glenda's unheard, and then listened to Megan's. "Bobby, it's me, Megan. I got your video." She started to sob. It hurt my heart. I now regretted sending the video to her. Why? Why did you send that to me? I was happy, Bobby. I was happy. I heard her quietly sobbing, then the message clicked off. Why, Bobby? Was a good question. I was hurting and wanted Doug to hurt. But I forgot to consider Megan. She didn't deserve this. Megan was from a farming family. Her parents had already passed away, and she and her 3 brothers had inherited the farm. Her siblings ran the farm, did all the work, but shared all profits equally with their sister, whom they adored. Megan was the youngest. She had a very pretty, sweet face, very wholesome looking. Standing only 5'1", when Doug first brought her home, the jokes were about her being as white as she was tall. That wasn't really true, although she was a stocky little thing, not my type at all. Glenda was thin and willowy, and fit right in my arms in a bear hug. The few times I've hugged my sister-in-law, it reminded me of trying to lift a barrel. She was solid, but more like the trunk of an old oak tree than a willow. Still, she was the sweetest woman I've ever met. There wasn't a mean bone or a nasty word in the woman. The longer my family knew her, the more we all agreed she was an angel. Now, I'd hurt her. I know, it was Doug and Glenda, but I was the one who had thrown it in her face. I was ashamed of myself. I played Doug's message. "You miserable duckwood. You just had to send that video to Megan and duck up my marriage. It's your own ducking fault. You can't duck properly, according to Megan, except missionary. She can't stand your stick in her any other way. And your milk makes her sick. She says it tastes like surströmming because you eat all that rotten fish. Your own wife can't stand you. She loves my milk, she say." I don't know what else she or he had to say. I didn't want to know. I deleted the message, the rest unheard. My phone rang. I saw it was Megan and answered immediately with an apology. "No, Bobby. I'm sorry I went off on you. I know it's not your fault that you're hurting." Her voice dropped. "I know it's Doug and Glenda who are responsible. I love them, Bobby. How could they do this to us? Do they love each other? Doesn't he love me anymore?" Her sniffling came over the phone. "I don't know about Doug, but it turns out that Glenda's just a hoe," I said, more vehemently than I had intended. Sweet Megan leapt immediately to defend her friend. She would never see the bad in anyone. Oh, no. They must love each other. I'm sure they couldn't help themselves. I began laughing. Seriously laughing. When I could, I responded that Glenda must love the world at large, based on the evidence. I told her about the videos I hadn't sent to her, the ones with the twins and the gardeners. I forgot to mention the random guy on Monday. I wondered how to find out who the heck he was. Megan was horrified, but Farm Girl Megan was more practical than the rest of us. "Bobby, should we get tested for STDs? Who knows what she might have picked up?" I was surprised that the thought hadn't occurred to me. I shivered at the thought of syphilis or gonorrhea, before the horrifying thought of incurable AIDS or even herpes infected my brain. God, you're right. I'm going to go down to the docks right now. "Bobby, could you take me? I don't want to go alone." Her despair flowed through the phone. I told her I'd be right there. When I got to Doug's house, I briefly wondered where he was. I didn't want to run into him. Instead, coming out the front door were Megan's 3 brothers. Some people think we Icelanders are tall, but nothing beats the Swedes. As small as Megan was, her brothers were just as tall. I'm 6'2", and I felt like a kid next to these bruisers. And they were hard men, working 12-hour days laboring on a farm. I'd always gotten along with them, but the looks they were giving me made me wonder if I should stay in the car. But I got out, and other than asking where that whole brother of mine was, they just passed me by carrying boxes to their truck. Megan met me at the door and explained that her brothers were moving her back to the farm. "Where's Doug?" I asked, although I really didn't want to know. I wasn't sure what I would do when I finally saw him. I hoped never to see him or Glenda again. I don't know. When he came home, I was crying on the couch. When I asked him why, he shrugged. When I told him my brothers were going to unalive him, he packed a bag and left. I thought he might be at your parents'. I thought back to that morning. My parents had maneuvered me away from the kitchen now that I thought about it. That a hole was probably there. I would deal with it later. Megan saw me clench my jaw and scowl at the thought of my brother. She stood on tiptoes to pull me down into a powerful hug. "Don't let this ruin your beautiful personality. Don't let others sour you." She kissed my cheek before releasing me. I was amazed that in her grief she still put thoughts of others first. I quietly led her out to the car and took her to the clinic for her tests. When I took her home, her brothers were finished loading the truck, waiting to take their sister home. I suggested that I take them to lunch, and Megan agreed. The brothers went along with her, but still looked at me with anger. At lunch, I told the story of Glenda's activities, and the brothers' anger turned to looks of pity. I realized at that moment that while Megan was a sympathetic figure as the betrayed wife, I was an object of scorn as the man who couldn't satisfy his wife. Worse, I was such a pitiful being that even my brother was doing my wife. Gunther, the oldest brother, asked what I was going to do about Doug. Same question my sister had asked. I told him that I didn't have a brother, but other than that, I don't know what I could do. When I said that, something in his eyes seemed to register that I was indeed a wimp. I tried to explain. Beating him up or hurting him financially would only alienate my family, although thinking back to the morning, maybe that shouldn't be a concern, or would damage Megan. Their bills, like most married couples, were in both their names. Hurting one would hurt the other. Likewise, trying to embarrass or discredit him with his infidelity would reflect on Megan and me. Especially me, I thought. I don't think I could take everyone looking at me like Megan's brothers were doing then. I want to smash his face into the ground. I want to crush his balls. I really want to hurt him, but I don't want to go to jail over Ho. I don't want to lose the little I have left. What can I do? I sounded whiny even to myself. But I'd been going over this problem in my head since seeing the first videos. Other than temporary release, I saw no upside to revenge against any of the men my wife was cheating on me with. My lawyer had made it clear that I would only hurt myself disseminating the videos I'd made. And the only other thing I could do to Glenda was divorce her, but since she didn't work I think that just meant I'd still be stuck supporting her sex life through alimony. I wanted to cut off her ears and her nose or ship her off to an Arabic house. I wanted not to feel so impotent. I realized, looking at Gunther, that I wanted my manhood back, but didn't know how to get it, without regret. Megan took my hand, and with the other hand turned my face towards her. "You are a loving man. You are a strong man, who has always done what is right. I know that you want to hurt your wife and your brother, and those other men as well, but I also know that you are better than that. I know that you are strong enough to find yourself without lowering yourself to their level." She pulled me into another of her bear hugs. I wept in her hair, unashamedly. It was cathartic and strangely comforting to be held by her. Her brothers looked away, uncomfortable with my unmanly display. But you know, Megan was right. I wasn't going to ruin what was left of my life for people who were beneath my notice. Even with alimony, Glenda was going to have to find a job. God, she'd hate that. She'd never had to work before and hated being told what to do. Plus, while I couldn't post the videos anywhere, I'm sure I could share them with her co-workers at any job she got. Who knows, maybe that would give her the sex life she wanted. The others, the men. Duck 'em. I'd wish a horrible disease on them, but Megan and I would probably have gotten it too. So, duck 'em. I know people would want me to burn the witch and duck over the bastards, but it really wasn't worth it. I smiled at Megan, drying my eyes. "You're right. I'm better than that." She smiled back at me as she and her brothers exited the restaurant. Gunther stopped and looked at me while I was signing the bill. I didn't think his look was one of approval. "You might be better than that," he snarled at me, "but we're not." He gave me an evil grin and left. Epilogue. Doug woke up, lying on the dirt floor of a barn. His body was bent with his face on his legs and his arms tied behind his legs. His bare bum, stick and balls were exposed and cold. "He's awake," said Sven. Doug saw the three brothers standing above him, Gunther flanked by Eric and Sven. Gunther knelt down and slapped his brother-in-law's balls. "Get the gelding knife, Sven," he commanded. "No, no. God no," Doug began begging. "You're lucky," Gunther assured him. "We geld our own sheep and cattle, so we know what we're doing. You'll heal up nicely." "But," he grinned evilly, "we haven't decided yet whether or not to leave the stick." Doug started pleading and begging, crying and sobbing hysterically. Sven returned with the knife, and Gunther patted Doug on his head. "It'll be over soon. Please no. I'll do anything, please." Doug was having trouble breathing. "You hurt our sister. That we can't forgive. You must be punished." Eric knelt down on the other side of Doug. Between sobs and panting for breath, Doug couldn't articulate his pleas any longer. Sven squatted down by Gunther and said, "You know, there may be another way. We could dip him." "Yeah, maybe we could do that," Gunther agreed. Eric also nodded. Help calm Doug enough for him to beg again. "Please, yes, please. Don't geld me." Eric got up and came back with a paintbrush and a jar of liquid. "What's that?" Doug wanted to know what the brothers were up to. "Sheep dip," Eric replied. "I've added a few other ingredients, so it's a little caustic." He dipped the brush in the liquid and began brushing it on Doug's genitals, making sure to cover every spot. As he dipped the brush for a second application, Doug began screaming. "Yes," said Gunther. "You're likely to lose a few layers of skin. If it works like it does on our hands, it eats some skin and kills some nerves. You'll keep your balls, but not get much feeling down there." As Doug continued screaming, Gunther put his mouth by Doug's ear and said, "Listen, Aho. The pain will diminish in a few moments. We'll drop you off at the hospital in an hour or so. You can report us to the police if you like. We don't care. Just know that the feeling someday may return to your stick, but we have friends who will finish your castration if we're arrested. And they'll take it all. Your choice. We recommend at the hospital that you tell them you accidentally grabbed the sheep dip instead of your usual lubricant." The three brothers laughed. Doug screamed some more. Later at the hospital, the nurses thought the sheep dip story was as humorous as the brothers did. The brothers were in a good mood that evening at dinner. "Oh, Megan," Gunther ordered. "You're making surströmming for dinner Saturday. I've invited Bobby to come to dinner." "Yeah," Megan's eyes sparkled. "He likes surströmming." Doug couldn't stand it. "Yeah, he likes it a lot." Gunther smiled. "He got really excited when I told him you liked the taste better than anything else." Megan licked her lips at the thought of surströmming. That's it for our two-part story, friends. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any story only here on Revealed Truth.